get that third party to come in and say, of course, Gary's right and David's wrong. So you got to do it Gary's way.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my scorecard is higher than yours, but that's okay.
It's different. It's different because you have a little bit more power than I do.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Biz Dev Podcast, a podcast about developing your business. I'm David Baxter, your host, joined per usual by Gary Voigt. Hello, sir.
Hello. And for those who watch the video, I know there's one person maybe, but the background is different today because you're in a different location. We did not change our branding.
No, I thought this was a cool backdrop. I'm in a co-working space today because I have a thing tonight. I thought this was neat looking. So a little depth.
Yeah,
you tell me
it looks like it's cool from the 70s.
I'll tell their designers that you said so. I'm sure they will appreciate that. Well, this place is like a year old.
Geometric felt shapes stuck to a wall. It's
a fancy way to do sound control is what they are.
Yeah.
They absorb sound in these little boxes of, I don't know, acoustic sound. All right. What are we talking about? We have no guests today, which always makes me sad. That's if we have to talk to you, and that always sucks.
Our guest had a different thing that they had to attend to today. That was probably
that's right. They had a conflict that came up. They will be back.
So today it's going to be just me and you chit-chatting and talking about stuff that's happening in our industry that we see with either new clients or founders or other people that you talk to in the industry when you do your schmoozing. So first off, we can talk about the fact that the 12-year anniversary of Big Pixel just passed.
It did. Actually, it was yesterday officially. March 23rd, for those who are keeping score. 3/23/13. I always thought that was fun. It was just somehow alliterative that it turned out that way. I did not do that on purpose. Lots of threes. We started 12 years ago, which I was very reflective. It hit me yesterday, and I wrote this big long, it turned out way longer than I expected, but the LinkedIn post reflecting. Every year I reflect on. Next year it'll be 13, which I'll probably just skip because it's bad. But it was fun.
It's fun looking back. We could just skip.
Yeah, we'll just skip it. I think that's so funny, by the way. This has nothing to do with them. They still do that. There are so many buildings that don't have a 13th floor. Anyway, I get reflective when it comes to our anniversary. It's weird to me that and it sounds strange to say, but it's weird we're still here. Because most businesses don't last as long.
What started out as just you going from consultant to freelancer and then just wanting a name other than your own, like that evolved a couple of times, and then you settled in. And then once you settled in, I'm sure you didn't really, you're like, let's see where it goes. As long as I can get enough work for myself.
It was always a rule. I think I've said this before. It was always a rule that I did not want to be a freelancer. When I went on my own and left my previous employ, I would tell people, because they would always ask, because it was just me, and they would ask, are you a freelancer? And I would say, no, I'm just the first employee of my company. And that was the vibe there. I hate that word. Why is that now in my lexicon? Anyway.
Because vibe coding is all.
Vibe coding makes me agitated, but we can talk about that later if we want to. But the idea behind that was I was going to be the infinite bucket. When you're a freelancer, you have a bucket. You fill your bucket, and then you're done. You've made all the money you can make, and you're happy, right? Usually you're making a nice living, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the end of your sales process. You have filled your bucket, you're done. My idea was the infinite bucket. I would fill mine, hire someone, fill theirs, hire someone, fill theirs. It didn't work out that way quite, but that was the idea. And so I worked like that for a while, and then slowly but surely it's funny, those first few years, and when I talk about the slog, I don't know, have I talked about our slog very much on this?
You've brought up a couple of stories here and there in reference when other founders or entrepreneurs have talked about their slog, once we explain kind of what we mean.
What the slog is. So I've told this story. If you've ever heard me give a speech, you have heard this story, because this is my story. When we got started, my old company, when I left, I thought they were going to hire me. I know I've said that many times. I thought in my hubris, whenever asked, why did you start a company? It was hubris is usually the answer. Pure pride. I thought I was better than other people, so I could therefore do it. Not a great thing. But if there is a nugget of truth in every entrepreneur that they think they're doing something better than other people, and you have to have that a little bit. Anyway.
You could just call it confidence.
That's fair. But confidence is not when you think you're better than someone. I'm going to be honest and be transparent. No. I thought I was better. So that's pride.
Okay. So it's pride. Not that you thought you were going to be able to do it. You just thought
No.
you should do it because you're better.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Again,
right.
naivete is beautiful. But so I went on my own, and my old company, I promised them I would not steal a client. That wasn't how I did things. And because that's very common. Normally, what people do when they start their own agency is they'll go and rob a couple of clients from their previous employee. And I was like, I'm not doing that. That's not how I'm going to do this. But I told them, hey, as soon as I update my LinkedIn, people are going to come to me because there are some people who've been working with me through my other company, and they're going to want to continue working with me. So I warned them. I said, I'm changing my LinkedIn. They said, hey, give me 3 days. We'll do our side of it. Okay. 3 days. I didn't ask permission. I changed my LinkedIn. I'm done. With that fail, within that same day, a client called me and said, what's up? And I was like, oh, hey, I'm on my own. And they're like, we don't want to work with them. We want to work with you. So I was at a conundrum of how do I do this? So I ended up buying them from my old employer, and they charged me all of the profit that they were going to make, plus a punitive amount that I was allowed to choose, which
That's
was just
just
like a
gnarly.
very special kind of torture. So my company's 3 months old, and I basically bought a car, right? Not an actual car, but the debt load of a car that my company, and I went and sat with these guys. They were really young, straight out of college, very sharp dudes, but they were young, and we're at Fire or Birds. No, is that right? I think that's right. Fire or something. Anyway,
Let
wonderful
the people
restaurant
know
nearby.
that. Yeah, I was going to say he's just talking
It's
about a
it's
restaurant somewhere.
it's
Doesn't
a
matter what the name is.
wonderful restaurant. Anyway, but I just remember the booze and everything. Like I see it even now because I've been there since then. And I'm like, guys, this is it. This is my mortgage. This is everything. I got kids, and they're like, we got you. I was like, you can't be late. And they're like, no, we got you. So fast forward. So that worked out. 9 months later, we did a great thing. They exited. They did a small exit, and they went out and did their own thing. I had not found another client. That was towards the end of the year. So now we were talking 9 months later, you're around Christmas time, right? Because I started in March. Christmas time comes along, and my wife is getting nervous because I have no work. And so I started making a resume for the first time in a decade or more. I bounced from job to job, so I hadn't had a resume.
So your
And
illustrious career of Sixel was dependent on one client for 9 months.
that's right. That is completely right. And then so
Leap of
I
faith, man.
start, here's the faith part. So January rolls around. I come to find out I had grossly overpaid my taxes. And that is what allowed us to continue. It was enough to support us for 3 more months.
Wow.
And I that's what I did. I paid myself using that tax refund, which was large. I ridiculously overpaid. And for a company as small as ours was at the time. So that 3 months, it's not like it magically changed. I got a couple of jobs, but I started marketing. I'm going to use that in big quotes, just talking to people, I guess is the best way to say it. But I ended up starting teaching. That's how I paid the bills. Is I started teaching code, how to code. It was in Ruby. I didn't know Ruby. So every day the night before, I would learn what I was going to teach. And that's how I did it for 6 months. And I was a horrible teacher. I melted those poor people's faces. Anyway, and then from that point on, once I started teaching, while I was teaching, I got my first really big client, and the rest is history. We were able to hire, and then et cetera, et cetera. And when I talk about slog, man, I've been through it. I've been through it. And everyone has their own story just like that. And I think those are great stories to tell because
Yeah.
it's such a big, rich part of any company, not just ours, but any company, to how you got from A to B. I would imagine Jeff Bezos has a very similar sloggy story of the first year of Amazon. I bet he selling books out of his car or whatever. I'm sure it's there. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's there.
Well,
I'm sure Bill Gates, all of them.
I think also the slog thing is not just a period that starts and then is over. Like I think there's multiple quote unquote slogs throughout the lifespan of any business as it grows and tries to grow and moves on, especially when you start bringing in more people, more clients, then there's always going to be more complex issues to solve, more processes
There
that have to be
is,
built. Like it's almost like a never ending, okay, we're through that part. And now we just turn the switch on and it's all good from here.
well, there's good and bad in that. So as the founder, your slog is very personal initially, right?
Yeah.
You are it, and it lives and dies based on your grit. Eventually, as I've said a million times, your job as a founder CEO is to give away your job. You give away most of that stuff. So that fear changes. Like I remember for years, I would say 5+ years, I had no idea what was happening 3 months from now. People would be like, "Hey, how's your company?" I'm like, "Great right now." 3 months, I have no idea. Like literally, my contracts were never longer than a few months. Project would last a few months, and then I would be like, "I don't know what's happening." Nowadays, it's probably closer to a year, 6 months to a year. We have clients that we've been with for almost 8, 9 years, and they, God willing, they are not going away. But even if they did, it would be a slow drawdown. It wouldn't be, "Hey, we're leaving tomorrow. Have a nice day." It would be, "We're going to slowly roll you off," and we would have time to adjust. And that takes off a lot of that. So some of that immediacy of the slog, that first one that we talk about mostly, that's unique. But you always have some precipice. Like we're at the precipice now where we're large enough that it can't be run by a person. We need processes. So we have been spending internally, I don't know, 18 months working on processes. How do we reproduce what we do so that it's more consistent across sales? That one's still squishy, but around project management, around development, around testing, how do we do this? And that has changed everything for us in the last 18 months. It's just so different now. It's not just me flying by the seat of my pants. I feel like doing this today. If Carl is I don't think we ever mentioned Carl. He's like the hamster wheel underneath the company. He just runs everything. He's brought a lot of that into place.
We've mentioned him once or twice, but yeah, I don't think we've given him, as the kids say, his flowers.
So yeah, anyways, yeah, I now see what happened. You bring up the anniversary, I get all nostalgic, and you get 30 minutes of me rambling. Sorry about that.
When we do talk to other guests and founders and entrepreneurs, whatever, as long as they're honest with us and with our audience, with themselves, really, like everybody has that same similar story. And then I know
Mhm.
there's also almost like an unspoken test of the first couple of years are like the make or break of what's going to happen. If you're going to be able to continue from there, or if you have to change or pivot or roll things back. And we've talked to companies that might have had to pivot after the first 2 or 3 years just because they weren't on the right track. And then after they've made that pivot, it just seemed to click and work a little bit better.
Mhm.
They've been able to go on further and further. Now, so the processes and stuff that we're coming up with now, they're not exactly a pivot, but I think it's just us adjusting to the longevity that we've actually been given.
If you're trying to recreate something consistently, you have to have a process
Yeah.
because people are not consistent. Some people are more consistent than others, but people are people, right? And people make mistakes. People get confused, whatever. It's just, especially when you're talking about founders in particular. Founders are generally a visionary type. That's their brain style. And that it does not end well. They're not detailed typically. Again, I'm making somewhat generalizations, but they're not the type who are really detail oriented. So they're just flying. I have an idea, I'm going to run with it. That idea didn't work. And it can cause whiplash for the people who aren't like that. Because visionary, there are a small group of people in this world. The people who do things that's super detailed, they're called integrators. At least when you're doing EOS, we've talked about that before. But integrators are actually, interestingly enough, they're rarer than visionaries. When you talk about the personality and the brain style of an integrator, that is rarer than the visionary.
Big Pixel builds world-class custom software and amazing apps. Our team of pros puts passion into every one of our projects. Our design-infused development leans heavily on delivering a great experience for our clients and their clients. From startups to enterprises, we can help craft your ideas into real-world products that help your business do better business.
Our clients change, our clients' needs change, and the
Mhm.
technology in which we use to build those products for our clients changes faster than any of that.
Yep.
Integrating these new technologies and the hype bus with everything that comes out
Crypto.
changes the reality. Let's just say the promises versus the reality of the output of these hype train technologies, stuff like that. Like all that, it changes constantly, especially AI. But so we also have to morph into, I guess, not just the company that builds the technology for our clients, but ones who tell them what they can and can't have, or what they should or should not do with the technology based on their business needs. How would you approach, let's say there's a small company that thinks AI is out there. So I'll go to this big pixel dev shop, custom software, and say, you know what? All I need you guys to do is use AI to plug me into this thing to build me an app real quick. How cheap is that? How fast can you do it?
Yeah, that's the same guy who asks me to rebuild Facebook because it's already been done before.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
that's
already
true.
there, dude. Just open
Yeah,
the
just
inspect code, copy and paste it,
just
and
take
change
the
the name.
stuff, man. Yeah, they've given you a roadmap. That's a true story, by the way. Anyway, what you just described is that vibe coding thing, which I circulated. Eric Boggs, who was on our podcast a while ago, and if you haven't listened to it, that's a wonderful episode because I'm a huge fan of his. He runs a company called RevBoss, but he's run several. He's very successful. He had this long thing. He started vibe coding, which if you don't know what that is, that's okay. What vibe coding is basically going to an AI chatbot and telling them what to do and not having to code and just having it write all the code. And you just prompt and prompt until you get something. You have to be somewhat technical to even get that far, but
Yeah.
and he of course is. But what he said was, well, here's I'll just boil down his he had a little post. I believe with AI, those V1s are going to be easier than ever. Exactly what you're talking about. The client who comes in and says, hey, just use AI. It should take 5 minutes. There is some truth to that now, but you can get to a V1 where you've got 50 or 100 users and it seems like it's working, but it's good enough to show around and to get some ideas. Is this a real company or not? It's good, great. Like an MVP, old school MVP. But he says V2 is going to be much harder to build because AI, the most practical example I've been able to give is if you're listening to this, imagine you go to the AI and you ask it to make you a picture, maybe a picture of a dog with a bird on its back, whatever. And you're like, oh, I like that dog, but I want to change the bird. And AI says, oh, here's an entirely new image. And like, I just
got a
wanted you to
pretty
change
good
the bird.
metaphor for this that just popped into my head, and it's tech related. It's like 3D printing. Okay, so
I've never done that, so go
V1,
for it.
here's the thing. You build the schematic or whatever, saying an AutoCAD-like program or an online browser app that just lets you put shapes and stuff together. And once you hit print, you print that first version, but it's all just one piece. So it looks good. It gets the idea across. It's a prototype, but when you're saying, okay, V2, we need to make some changes, you have to rebuild everything
You have to
from
start over
scratch.
again.
You can't just take V1 and start adding to it or multiplying it or making adjustments. You have to start completely over. And I think with this vibe coding thing, getting to V1, yeah, it'll get you there fast. But even if it works and it's getting the job done and you're somewhat technical enough to understand that, the expansion from there on might require you to go back and look at how the structure was started in the first place.
Yeah, a good example of that. And I think that's a good analogy because if you go one step further, if you're really good at 3D printing, what you'll notice, someone who really knows what they're doing, again, AKA us, right? If we were in art, they don't do the single piece, right? They do 27 pieces and they put it all together, which you can get amazing results on it. But the first guy is always doing one solid piece, right? What you like, a good example is a database, right? I'm not trying to go not too wonky here, but you have a database, right? And normally there's a pool of connections that you can have. And you build this pool concept one time. It lives in the bottom of your app. It's in deep down in the code. And you have one place where everything that needs to connect to the database grabs the same kind of pool, and they grab one of the instances and they go. If you're doing AI, and you build the user screen, it's probably, and again, I'm not an expert of the vibe coding, but it's not thinking between screen A and screen B. It's that screen A is a complete app and screen B is a complete app. So it's going to do the whole thing. And they're not sharing, right? There's no sharing of code. There's no any of that, right? It's going to do what it does. And it does this in a monolithic fashion, not thinking of security. And again, the better you are at AI, the more you can make it handle some of this stuff. But again, if you're doing this vibe coding, you don't know what you're doing. You're building the single 3D model. And I think that when they come to us, they're like, man, I've got this business idea. I've got this prototype out here. I'm ready for V2. They're going to be surprised that we have to throw that all away, or most of it, because it's not built in a way that's scalable. It's not secure necessarily. And now the question is, can AI get around that? Yes. but I think it's still going to require a very technical person to say, AI, I want you to build the security layer here. I want you to build the data layer over here. I want the UI to be this. You know what I'm saying? They're still using AI to build things, but it requires understanding software at such a level that you're a developer anyways. And we're doing some of that internally, right? We use these tools too. Now it's not writing entire apps for us, but it is helping us code, and we're directing it. We've talked about that before. Cursor is one we've married pretty hard right now, but it's a paradigm shift for sure.
One other thing we can approach to how we handle situations with the changing technology, and also how we would handle, say, that V2 you spoke about comes to us as a new project from a client. So they already have kind of a V1. It's already shown that it's got promise. You've already told them we need to start over because what they have is not exactly scalable. What do you think the challenges are, and how do you think we would approach recreating V1 into a better V2 from two different perspectives? Your perspective being more technical, more development, and my perspective being more on the design, the UI side of it.
More useless. Yeah, I got you. No, I would actually challenge. You're welcome. I would challenge that because I don't think you can do one without the other. I know I give you grief, but we always start with design. There's a reason our slogan is design-infused development, right? It is what we do differently than almost every other dev shop that I know of, and I know a lot of them. We just do it differently. Design is the cornerstone of all of our stuff. We build upon our designs. And when someone comes to us and they're like, this is great, but now I need V2, we're going to start from a design perspective and that creative perspective, because I need to get their ideas out of their head into something they understand. No one understands what we do on the technical side, right? That's black magic and alchemy. It's unapproachable and scary and intimidating. That's what, if you're not technical, it's all those things. But design is visual. Humans are visual. So when I show you a screen, or you show them a screen, I don't have anything to do with it anymore. When you show them a screen, they immediately get it. Everyone gets it, because this finally they're seeing what's in, and you do a good job of walking them through it after getting their preferences and whatever, that it's not, we're rarely way off. You know what I'm saying? That's not what I had in mind. You suck. We don't have that problem generally, but I think that allows them to, and then from there we can glom on, that's a word there, from your design into the technical realm, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that works so well with us is this is very true. There have been many times when we'll have a third party into one of mine and Gary's strategy sessions, and they leave that shell shocked because we just rip into each other because we're used to it. We've done this forever, and we're used to it because we know at the end of the day, what's going to come out on the other side is going to be better. But sometimes the process of getting to that better gets pretty ugly, and it never gets truly insulting, but it's pretty rough. And we've had it several times. We're like, whoa, that was something. I said, yeah, but look what we get. It's pretty cool.
I think it's just a matter of we're approaching trying to solve the same problem with using two different complete mindsets of who we're solving for in some cases. I think when we get into the nitty gritty of actually building, like, all right, we've spec'd it out. We know what they want. They've seen the wireframes, and we're putting things together. We're starting to build screens, and we're coming up on issues that we might need to solve or go around, or, oh, we didn't really think of this screen, or this is now going to change to this process. But sometimes I feel like the mindset you approach these problems with is more of, okay, I understand the problem. How are we going to solve this? Meaning, how are we going to build this? What can we do?
Technical.
What technically can we build to make process A meet up with process B to get the answer to there? And what's the quickest and easiest way that we could build this together? My approach is completely different. My approach is, it's not what the client wants. It's not what you want. It's actually what the client's user wants.
Yeah.
So it's 3 levels deeper of me trying to look at this saying, I don't really care how you build it. I just know that the easiest thing for me as the user to go from here to there and see what I want to see and be able to access the information and then make changes and go back is this way. It just seems to make more sense. And that's typically a pattern people would recognize. So then we have to meet in the middle somewhere, or at least get that third party to come in and say, of course, Gary's right and David's wrong. So you got to do it Gary's way.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my scorecard is higher than yours, but that's okay.
It's different. It's different because you have a little bit more power than I do.
Yeah, it's not quite fair. I abuse my authority for sure. No, and that's specific to us, but I guess what I would take out of this from the larger thing to take out of that, I think conflict is something most people try to avoid. And I'm one of those people. I do not like true conflict. But I do think that having differing opinions and the diversity, however you want to say that, is so powerful. Our apps are better because we give people freedom to argue.
Yeah. And arguments are not conflict in their original form. They become conflict when either party chooses not to listen.
Well, it doesn't respect the other side. I think when you lose that respect, as long as it comes from a place of respect, who cares? Let them go.
The other thing is also people in their specific roles know their roles to the point where if there is an argument about how good they are at their role, that's different than how good they are at actually producing from that role. You know what I mean? So during any of these, they're basically just constructive criticisms from two different angles. They're not really arguments, but it's like you said, it's like challenging each other's mind on why do you think that's the best approach when there's also this approach, and then going back and forth. So if there's someone that's just stuck in we're doing it this way because I've been doing it this way, I'm obviously the one who knows how to do it this way. And then I'm just going to keep going down this path of me doing it this way. That doesn't lead anywhere productive for everybody else. We want to actually change that way. Okay. So after spilling some inside guts that we probably shouldn't have, and then talking about 12 years of Big Pixel and everything changing in our industry, where do you see, like you ask our guests, where do you see Big Pixel in 5 years?
That's an interesting question right now because of AI. Because I could talk forever about how I think so much about AI is hype and it's not true, what is being said by Sam Altman and all those people. But what is 100% true is software development is changing dramatically. Our job every day is changing. We are using more tools now than we ever have. And our goal is to get faster this year using AI tools. The fear I have is that AI is going to change us so dramatically that we won't be recognizable. That's my fear. There's quotes and stuff that, 90% of all code is going to be written by AI. Is that true? Probably not, at least in the short term. But I know I'm off the rails there, but it really does affect what we look like in 5 years. I would imagine what we look like in 5 years is we are much more strategic. Because coding is going to often be done by a bot. The typing will be done by a bot. And I joke with my team, like some of our devs really don't want to embrace, they've been doing this a very long time, 20 plus years. They don't want to change how they're doing this stuff. And so
spend less time typing, more time thinking.
Yeah. My challenge to them is, did you become a developer to be a typist or just problem solve? Because I can take away the typing so that all you're doing is problem solving. But that changes how we do our jobs very dramatically. And so the thing that's at the core of what we do that is the most human is the strategy. Someone comes to us, how do I make an app that's going to be great and it's going to be appeal to my customers and it's going to do what I need to do? I don't know how to get there. That's that strategy. So I would imagine a lot of our value leans harder into that. But I don't know. 5 years ago, we were much smaller, right? But we were largely doing the same thing we're doing now.
I would also
in 5 years, I don't think we'll be doing the same thing we're doing now. Not pivot, just I think our industry will have changed underneath us so much that our day-to-day job will be different.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll be doing the same thing from a high level of what we're actually
product
doing.
perspective.
But the process of how we create these products or whatever is going to change. But also, I had a thought, and I think it just when you were saying that you ask the devs, did you become a developer to type or to solve problems? I think now also it used to be where you had to be a specialist in a certain language, right? I think that's pretty much out the window now for developers. It's not like you have to be a specialist in just one language. You could be a specialist in like all right, maybe not a specialist, but say if you're a specialist in 1 or 2 languages, you still have access to quote unquote specialists in all the other languages through AI. You know what I mean?
Yes and no. I think I'm going to challenge that because I think
I'm not a developer, so this is what I'm assuming is that you'd be able to, because I know that even when I need small little JavaScript stuff, I wouldn't even know that it needed to be JavaScript stuff if I'm
sure.
working on a web page or whatever. But if I ask AI, how do you do this? It'll say, here's a script for that. And then here's also how you could do it with HTML and CSS. Or you could do it with both of them combined. And there's this way.
I would not be, but there's so much to coding now that's not actually coding. And I think it's a lot like an NFL team. It used to be that you'd play offense and defense 50 years ago. Now everything is specialized, right? I have a guy who only returns punts. I have a guy who only holds the football for a field goal, right? That's all he does. And I think developers are going to get more specialized in what they're very good at because AI is going to take care of the easy stuff. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this rambling episode between me and Gary. Hopefully it was enlightening in some way. Hope you learned something. We will be back next week with a guest.
That wraps up this episode of the BizDev Podcast. Thanks for listening. Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at hello@thebigpixel.net or connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and LinkedIn. BizDev is a production of Big Pixel, a US-based provider of UX, design, strategy, and custom software. This podcast is edited by Matt McCracken, yes, that is his name, and me, Christy Pronto, marketing guru for Big Pixel.